Hi. In previous sessions, we've already completed the budget tracking project in SQL Server where we learned table creation and value insertion, data modeling where I created star schema, relationship type explained, fact versus dimension table, completed ER diagram, and solved top KPI using SQL query. Now, we are going to take it further and enhance our analysis in Power BI where we will learn data loading from SQL Server, data cleaning and modeling, DAX calculations and visualizations for more powerful insights into our budget tracking project. The dashboard will look like this. Let's begin by loading the data we've previously prepared in SQL Server. Go to the Home tab and click on Get Data. From the options, select SQL Server. Provide the server and database name. Let me copy the server and paste here. And my database name is Budget Tracking and it is optional. I am using import mode, then OK. Next, select the tables or views we've worked with in SQL Server. I am selecting Budget, Expense Categories, Expenses and Users tables. And click Transform. These will bring in all the pre-processed data we've prepared earlier. Now I am going to delete some unwanted columns from every table. Click on Close and Apply. And transformed data will be loaded. It's time to set up the data model. We've already created the relationships in SQL Server, but here in Power BI, we need to ensure everything is linked together correctly. As you can see, the tables we imported are already in the data model. Now, let's make sure the relationships are intact. For example, we can link the Budget table to the Users and Expense Categories table using the User ID and Category ID field. Again, Expenses table to the Users and Expense Categories table using the User ID and Category ID field. Now let's create a Measures table where I will implement DAX. Go to Enter Data and provide a table name. Key Measures table. Now table is created. Before creating the measure, let's check the data model. Here is the data model that's created in SQL Server earlier where users and expense categories are connected to expenses and budgets with one-to-many relationship. Let's see in Power BI model. Here budget and expense categories are connected with one-to-one relationship. Let me change with one-to-many. Here users and expenses relationships are inactive. Let me change with active relationship. You have to check the box. Make the relationship active and click Save. Now data modeling step has done. Our next step is to create DAX. Here is the top KPIs that I have created in SQL project and here. I will create the same KPIs in Power BI project. So, let's start to create the measures. First up, we have the total expense amount. This part sums up all the expenses from the expenses table using the sum function. It adds together every value in the expense amount column to get the total expenses. Next, we calculate the total budget amount. Similar to the expenses, this uses the sum function to total up all the values in the budget amount column of the budgets table. This gives us the total amount budgeted. Now that we have both the total expenses and the total budget, we calculate the remaining amount by subtracting the total expenses from the total budget. This tells us how much budget is still available. Let's move on to the budget status formula. This one uses a few variables to make the logic clearer. We start by creating two variables, expense total, which stores the total expense amount, and budget total, which stores the total budget amount. Then, we use an if statement to compare the total expenses with the total budget. If the total expenses are less than the total budget, the formula returns within budget. If the total expenses are greater than the budget, it returns over budget. In summary, this formula calculates how much of the budget is remaining, and it also tells us whether we are within the budget or have gone over. Next measure is budget utilization percent. Let's start with the variables. The formula begins by creating two variables. First, total, which stores the value of the total expenses using the measure total expense amount. This calculates the sum of all expenses. Next, we have the budget variable. This uses the selected value function to get the budget amount from the budget's amount column. The selected value function returns the value of the budget based on the context, like if you are filtering by a specific category. Now, we move on to the if condition. The formula checks if the budget is not blank and is not equal to 0. If the budget is valid, i.e., not blank and not 0, it proceeds to calculate the utilization percentage. If the budget is blank or 0, it returns 0. Here you can see the complete formula. Next, I am going to calculate average expense. This formula uses the average function. It calculates the average of the values in the expense amount column from the expenses table. Let me first create a date table from expenses table. I will create two variables, start date and end date, where the start date is the minimum of expense date and end date is the maximum of expense date. After that, I am going to create date measure variable where I will add some columns using DAX. That is, add columns, calendar, start date, end date. Then name of the column and expression. That is, year, date, month name, format, date, comma, day, date. Now the year, month name and day columns are added. Now return date measure that I have created. Finally, date table is created. Now let me check the table. Here you can see the table. After creating the date table, go to Data Modeling view to establish the relationship between DIM date and fact tables. Here budget and expenses are two fact table. DIM date will connect to expenses with date and expense date with one-to-many relationship and single direction. Again, DIM date will connect to budgets with date to budget month, one-to-many single direction filter. Now data modeling is done. Here date column is in date time format, so let's change budget month and expense date to date time format. Everything looks fine. Now it's time to create visualizations. First, I dragged the line chart, in which I used day in x-axis and total expense amount in y-axis to view daily expense. I will format it later. Second, let me create a clustered column chart, in which I used category name in x-axis and total expense amount in y-axis to view category-wise expense. You can also use category name in legend and month in x-axis to monthly expense in each category if we have available monthly data. But in this case only March data is available, that's why the visual is looking like this. So I am going to change it as previous. Now I am going to create a matrix where I will show expense amount versus budget amount and the remaining budget per user per category. So I dragged month in column, user category and user name in rows. Then total budget amount and total expense amount in values. Now you can see monthly expense versus budget amount per user category wise. Let's formatting the charts. Click on chart, then go to format your visual. I changed the layout and style default to minimal. Then on the vertical grid line. Then setting the font to SEGOE UI bold with font size 11. Change the same for column header and row header as well. I changed the column grand total and row grand total background color. I have added the remaining amount in the values to see users who exceeded budget. Now let's move to format the line chart. In X-axis I changed the font. And in Y-axis I turned off the values and title. Then change the line color. Then change the marker color. After that I turned on the data level and changed the font. Then I am changing the title, that is daily expense trend. Then turned on the divider and visual border with rounder corner to 8 point. The formatting of this visual is done. To format the column chart same as line chart. Click on the line chart anywhere, then go to Home tab and click on Format Painter and paste to the column chart. Here you can see the formatting is copied. Now I am going to draw cards to see the total amount of budget and expenses. In this card I dragged total budget amount and changed the callout value and category label, font and size. Turned on the visual border. Here, in the metrics, I am going to add one column, that is budget utilization %. Go to Key Measures table and drag budget utilization %. Now the column is added. Then we want to see budget versus expense amount. So, I dragged the donut chart. From Key Measures table, I dragged total budget and expense amount in values. Then go to Format Visual and change the legend position to bottom center and turned off title. Change the font to SEGOE UI bold and font size 11. You can also change the slices colors as you want. Then changing the font in detail levels. Now to rename the title. Go to General, then Title. And rename Budget versus Expenses, then change the font of title. Then go to Effect, turned on Visual Border and rounded corner to 8 point and turned on the divider. Now I formatted this visuals. Let me resize the above cards and slicers. Click on the slicer, then Format Visual. In General, go to Property to set the height and width. I am going to set the same height and width for other card and slicers and resize the position. Save the report. Now the report is saved. You can also change the theme. Go to View tab and you can see lot of themes are available. You can choose any one and apply. Yes, this theme is perfect. Here in matrix, let me check the values of budget utilization % I have added in the last. We can clearly see that the values are not correct, so let me check the formula. Oh, there is one mistake in the formula. I have used selected value in budget variable that is wrong. Let me change it. I am using total budget amount. Now let me check the values in matrix. Perfect. The values are corrected. The total budget amount is 2350 and expense amount is 1550.50. So the remaining amount is 799.5 and budget utilization % is 66% in February month. Now I am going to add one card for total budget utilization %. I copied one card and drag the budget utilization % measure. Here the total budget utilization % is showing 87%. Now let's check the KPIs. We can see the top 5 KPIs are completed, so let's move to understand the 6th KPI, that is category-wise expense breakdown. For this visual we need to create some DAX, so let me create it. I am going to create expense amount 2. And the formula is calculate sum of expense amount, remove filters expense categories. And then creating another DAX expense %. First creating a variable category total, that is total expense amount created earlier, so I used directly. And the second variable is all expense, that is expense amount to created just now with filter. And then using return. What we need to see in result. I am going to divide category total by all expense, and the formula is divide category total all expense 0. Using comma 0 for if error. Now the formula is created. Now it's time to choose right visual. And I am going to choose decomposition tree. Now let me drag the expense % in analyze. And converting it in %. Second, drag the category name in explain by. Here plus sign is visible and you can expand it. And you can see all category is breaking down with %. Now this KPI is done. Let me format this visual. Let me check the all KPIs. Here we can see all KPIs are done except most frequent expense category. So let me work on it. And for this visual the DAX formula is count, expenses, expense ID. Let's maintain the space for this new visual. I increased the width of the canvas. Then I copied the metrics and dragged expense frequency in values. Finally, all the KPIs are done. And we can see our dashboard is ready. Now let's work to format the UI. I am going to move the slicers and card to the right side. And then adding a text box to write the title of the report. And the title is Budget versus Expense Report. Then change the font and size. And do other formatting, like I am going to turn off the background. Now the dashboard is completed. Thanks for watching.